Hey, welcome back. If you saw yesterday's keynote from Fiserv and Keith, you heard a little bit about this story, but today we're going to go into it in a little more detail. This next session is the hotness. We've got Clint and Mac from Fiserv telling you about their experience processing billions of dollars of loans from the Paycheck Protection Program that came out earlier this year. So hold on tight. This is a good one. Take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, Matt. Okay, Fiserv is an industry leader in financial technology, and it powers U.S. banking and credit union establishments with about 36% market share and growing. Fiserv has about $10 billion in annual revenue and is number 311 on the Fortune 500. Next slide. We're all too aware of the impacts of the coronavirus on the economy. And when the federal government stepped in to pass payroll protection legislation, the industry suddenly had a program without a solution to carry it out. Fiserv found itself in a situation where banks and credit unions were requesting assistance on behalf of their customers. Fiserv only had 3 weeks to research, to design, to develop and test, release an industry-leading solution. And I'm proud to say that we were able to process tens of thousands of loan applications, resulting in more than 18,000 small business loans, totaling about 1.4 billion US. Fiserv's SBA solution consists of 4 main parts. The applicant portal. This is the UI where small businesses go to complete applications online, provide the necessary documentation, and digitally sign the application. The application review workflow in itself, it's a workflow process allowing administrators, loan officers, and applicants to interact along the life cycle of the loan. And this is very important because applications require corrections, additional information, etc. And the financial institution portal, this is the UI where banks and credit unions go to review the applications, perform maintenance, and submit to the SBA. Finally, the SBA integration component understands how to transmit vetted applications to the SBA for their approval. The pivotal Tanzu platform allowed Fiserv to accomplish all of these goals. And first, it's all about time to market. We needed to become much more agile. And as the quote says, vision without action is a daydream, but action without vision is a nightmare. And we take that pretty seriously. Pivotal allowed us to implement our microservice and micro application strategy. And the key is iteration. Instead of monthly or quarterly releases, we needed to support daily releases. We needed to abandon reactive approaches to reliability in favor of proactive measures. Running cloud native services within PCF and Kubernetes provides us with the self-healing capability that we needed. Since the load characteristics of PPP is so unpredictable, the ability to auto scale has been immensely useful, scaling up for huge spikes and scaling down in the quiet times. One of the greatest surprises along this journey, in moving to Pivotal in general, is the level of application density that we've experienced. We estimate that we are seeing 6 to 15 times more density, and this is running more software on the same hardware than before. And this is thanks to capabilities like the auto scaling mentioned. So one of the, I think what we've done with such a small team here is just amazing. If you look at the number 8 developers, 2 architects, and this is basically the fundamental basic resources thrown at this project, 436 code releases over 28 days. I think it speaks for itself here. All right, so I think at Fiserv, we judge our success by our customers' success. And, here is just one small positive response from one of many customers that are out there. And, that means a lot to us personally. On that note, I'm going to hand over the presentation to my head of enterprise architecture, Srinivas Makani.
All right. Thank you, Clint. Appreciate it. How do you build an enterprise application in a few days? My name is Srinivas Machani. Agents call me Mac. I've been with Fiserv for the last 9 years. And I'll take you through our journey of those 28 days, through the valleys and peaks and springs of SBA loans, if you will. As Clint mentioned, we did this within 4 weeks. When we first got the requirement, we did not have anything, nothing to start with. But we did have the Tanzu platform out there. So what we did was we started building up the infrastructure. So we had both the platforms, the Tanzu application server, as well as the TKGI platform as well. And we had some of the surrounds built out, the Splunk and the APM. So the day came when it was March 31st, I remember pretty well. And I said, hey, you got the first loan of round of funding. It's going to expire in a couple of weeks. We need to get this app out fast. So we started working on it. We started with the API and the DB design. And then we built the CI/CD pipelines to support it. And when we started this, like Clint said, there were very few people that were part of this effort, right? And we had to make use of every body out there. And we summoned all the forces that Fiserv had, and everybody pitched in, and we built this platform out. And once it was built, it looked something like this, right? We had the loan applications coming in from the loan applicants on the far left side, as you can see it. And the color coding tells you what kind of protocols we're using different protocols to satisfy the requirement here. So we had the loan officers, which were the banks, who were supposed to actually approve the loans that the small businesses applied for. And when they came in, the applications came in, we actually exposed a React.js front-end application that rendered on their browsers. They would fill the application and submit it. And once we got the application, it would actually store everything in a database in the SQL Server far right SQL Server database. And all this was rendered through APIs that we built out in the Tanzu layer. So in the Tanzu application server. And we used Spring Boot, of course. We built the API using a pretty simple RESTful APIs in Spring Boot. And since we had to build it in a very short amount of time, we utilized as many features as possible from Spring out of the box. So we used things like auto scaling that and also the self-healing. So when we started this, we knew that there was going to be some mistakes made, and we wanted to be able to recover quickly with the self-healing features as well. When we did the DB design, we used Spring Data JPA, and we also had to do some sort of authentication of the users. And the way we did that was using an OTP token, and we built that all from ground up with databases and tables, etc. But we definitely utilized the Spring JPA, and also some of the Spring libraries. We use Spring Fox for the Swagger Hub documentation that it provides. We use Spring DevTools, which when you change the code, it automatically compiles and deploys to the embedded Tomcat server. And the auto configuration features of Spring were really, really useful for us. And we use something called FOP, which was to generate the PDF files that the government really requires, right? Where once the form is filled out, the applicant actually needs to sign the form. So we used the React.js application for the applicant to actually sign it on their either smartphone or desktop or whatever device they were using. And we created the PDFs out of that and submitted them to SBA. And SBA itself was actually exposing, in the first round of funding, they exposed SOAP-based web services. So we kind of built the connectors to those. And actually, this is a real story. We didn't have our vendor credentials until the last day. So we didn't know when we were going to be able to access it, whether we would hit it or not. We were just doing it in a sandbox that SBA provided. But once we got the access on the day when they opened it up, since we had done a lot of testing, everything, it worked out really good for us. And we used the usual Spring Boot Maven plugins to generate the jars and deploy them. So the CI/CD pipeline that we built, I would say it's pretty state of the art. We use all the right tools. We use Jenkins. We had webhooks from GitHub. So from the CI side of it, whenever a developer did their code and committed to GitHub, it would actually deploy to one of the lower environments and would have our QA actually test it out. And then once it created the image, it actually stored in Artifactory, and we will kick off the Sonar Cube and the twist log scans. So we didn't actually skip any steps from a security standpoint. We actually did a pen test, a penetration testing in the middle of this whole thing. And as you can imagine, between March and April, the 28 days that we worked at it, we were pretty much working around the clock. We had teams from offshore working on it, onshore working on it. It was just a handoff. When they went to sleep, we would pick it up. And these pipelines really helped us out because you don't want to be moving code manually. And with these automated pipelines, they would deploy the code to our lowers, and then we would have some sort of a authorization or some administrator giving the sign off and saying, okay, we can move the code to production. Because all this needs to be tested from a user standpoint. They should be able to access those loans, look at the applications, make changes to it. And no application is complete without having some sort of a APM or application performance management or some sort of a dashboards, right? So we actually built these dashboards. If you look at these, we built these dashboards on top of the Tanzu platform. We had Dynatrace, which we hooked into the containers as a, I believe it's a sidecar. So we were able to get some important metrics out of it. So if you look at some of these, when I took the snapshot, there were about 16 pods running the code, and you can see the load also as it was doing, the latency, et cetera. We were keeping a close eye on that, the CPU usage, and the DB requests, and the response times as well. That's important because you had tons and tons of business users logging in from all around the country. And you probably heard it in Keith's speech, but we got some very good anecdotes from these business owners who were really, really grateful that Fiserv did this and helped them out in the time of need. And we also looked at the infrastructure, right? It's just not enough to look at the application, but you also need to know how your infrastructure is doing, the underlying Tanzu platform. So we're looking at the CPUs, the latencies, and also some of the forms were performing. So one of the things we found was that with all this analysis, that some of the pods were crashing. So we deploy the code, restage them, but at some point it would start crashing. When we start analyzing this, and we used Splunk logs for that, right? We really needed to see what was going behind the scenes. It also gave us a pretty good view of how many CPUs, how much memory was being used, and in-depth logging that was directly gotten from the Tanzu platform. So anything you put out to standard out, it's captured here, and some of the metrics as well, it came out. So when we looked at this, it was spewing about thousands of lines of SQL out there. And we're wondering what is going on. And what we found out was that some of the lessons learned in that was that we had the transaction boundary and the context assigned to Spring Data JPA objects. And when we were trying to do a retrieve, we're getting page pagination, we were getting the first 10 rows, but for the count, it was actually getting the whole data set back. So it was actually getting the entire data back. So, and we were able to realize it pretty quick and fix that issue as well. And some of the other things we also found was that, that unintentional data mutation, when you have the context in the Spring Data JPA, you can call it a business mistake, but hey, we were running at 60 miles an hour, 18 hours of working, 4 hours of sleep. So, we were bound to make some mistakes, but the bright side is we actually were able to recover with the platform, giving us so many features. And one advice I would give you is when you're designing, at least when you're designing fast, make sure your database design is correct. And we faced a lot of issues. You probably did in your experience too. When you design these objects, the naming convention is very important because that'll all tie back to how the objects are created, how the models are created, and the mixed case, camel case, fast case, whatever. Stick to a particular naming convention, and it'll be very helpful down the road, right? So that was our SPA journey, and then beyond SPA, we actually had another parallel track going on before the whole SBA and the COVID hit. We were actually working on microservices. We had a huge monolith, which had about 150 services or so, SOAP-based web services, and we wanted to microsize them. And how would you microsize them? We went about looking at what different patterns. We looked at, we did the DDD analysis on it, domain-driven design by Eric Evans. We put different lenses on it and said, okay, what is the business functionality? What is the commonality we have between these services? And how often are these used? And what's the volume of these services? And based on that, we were able to segregate them into their own domains. And because you can't put all the code in all the containers, that defeats the purpose of microservices. So we want to create services that belong to a particular domain. And putting one service per pod is also not optimal. So we came up with these sort of rough domains, if you will. And then we also reorganized our entire organization. We restructured it. Basically, we said, okay, here's the different domains. Here's the different families of teams that are going to work on it. Here's a number of changes we did in the past year. And one of the major drive for us was that we were doing one release a year, right? We were not agile at that point. So with the platform, with the CI/CD tools, and microsizing our services, we are able to get to 1 quarter release now. But our goal, and Clint will back me up on, defects that were found, we were immediately able to fix it. So back to the story about TKGI, where we want to containerize our services. We came up with the domains. We had a platform built out, and our platform team and engineering teams helped out tremendously. They had great knowledge on the platform. They also worked with the pivotal engineers. We faced a lot of issues, as anybody would, with NSXT routing and load balancers, IP ranges, you name it, everything in between. But finally, we were able to create something like this. Right? We created these Docker containers running in Kubernetes, and we actually have it in production today. We're running these. We have about 300 pods running, and we have a huge infrastructure behind this TKGI. And we have all the supporting cast and the people to support this, right? And last I would leave you with what Fiserv does today. All our associates worldwide, we have one thing in mind. We're focused on how to deliver superior value for the clients. And also, I think Clint mentioned we are Fortune Magazine's World Most Admired Companies the last 6 years in a row, and a Fortune 200 company as well. With that, say thank you for attending, and we'll jump onto the Q&A session to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Clint and Mac. That was really educational, and I just find this story really inspiring, and I can't wait to hear more from all of you. Stick around, everybody. Only a couple more sessions to go.